You're watching the race. Now, elections are about winning and losing, but sometimes it's hard to know the difference. We'll explore the potential for coalitions in South African politics. But first, another crucial factor in this election is voter turnout. Now, in terms of the 2019 benchmark, you can see that the ANC is very high at 59%, followed by the DA at 21.3% and the EFF 12.1%. But then when you talk to people who say they will definitely vote, the ANC goes even higher, followed, of course, by the DA, but which takes a dip, and then the EFF, which follows the same pattern to the Democratic Alliance. Now, this is very interesting, isn't it, Bill? Because I've been watching the ANC president. One of the messages he doesn't forget at almost each and every rally he goes to is to remind people that one thing that's going to make a difference is if they wake up on that day, the 8th of May, and actually go to the polls.
Yes, although, as I said before, I'm pretty sure turnout will fall, actually, overall. But what that's showing is differential turnout, the fact that the ANC is slightly more likely than its benchmark to turn out, whereas the other two are a little bit less likely. And that, I think, is significant because in previous elections, the DA in particular has been better than the ANC at getting its vote out. So if that isn't true this time, that will hurt them.
In fact, the ANC continues to argue that it wasn't really beaten, in places like Nelson Mandela Bay. For example, what actually happened there was that its voters didn't turn up to vote.
Yes, well, I'm not sure I buy into that excuse. Actually, fewer people stayed away, around 3 million or so, between the 2014 and 2016 election than did the election before that, in which about 3.5 million ANC voters stayed away. So it actually did better in 2016 in terms of turnout than it did the local government election before. But the opposition does enjoy a big differential advantage, and that's not to say it's not true that the ANC suffers the consequences of its voter apathy. When it comes to national elections, as you see here, that sort of differential is almost completely neutralized. And generally, historically, the ANC and the DA sort of match each other when it comes to getting their own voters to the polls. And you can sort of see that there. There's not a big difference between their benchmark and their actual number that they amongst those that will definitely vote. The DA's problem, as Bill alludes to, is that it's got a fundamental problem with its base in this election. Its core support base are the ones that are unhappy and apathetic and staying away and bleeding a bit to the smaller parties. So it's had to invest enormous energy in trying to get that base back on board and willing to vote on election day. And it's one of the reasons why it has detracted from its ability to win new voters. And that's going to be its big challenge on election day, whether it can get those people to the polls in their numbers.
Bill, I know you've said that coalitions are unlikely after this election, but let's take a hypothetical situation. In the event they do, certain places or provinces do indeed have to have a coalition. Take us through this question, how we got to that and how it was posed.
Okay, well, first of all, in all the focus groups, coalitions are unpopular. People say, we don't really want it because they all fight, and they're all out for their own party and so forth. So, of course, that may be true, but if the votes, if the cookie crumbles in such a way that you can only get a 50% by getting somebody else's help, then you do it. Now, the one you were showing before, which was showing that the most popular coalition partners are ANC and EFF.
Okay, let's go back to
that isn't really too surprising. They're two more sociologically similar electorates. In a way, the EFF-DA having any votes at all for, preferred partners is quite striking. Obviously, a reflection of municipal realities. And the ANC-DA. Well, considering that there's never been such a coalition yet in South Africa, a surprisingly large number of people are willing to think of it.
Well, I mean, the ANC said there's no appetite whatsoever for an ANC DA coalition. But from what you know, Gareth, what have been the experiences here beyond, of course, what gets said in public?
Well, I think the first thing from an entirely political point of view is that the EFF has played the coalition game, so to speak, better than anyone else. It's basically organized a series of relationships with the DA and smaller parties where it has no formal responsibilities but can reap all the benefits of the kind of internal influence or havoc as it sees fit that it wreaks. It has upturned a coalition which seemed to be functioning in terms of service delivery fairly well in Nelson Mandela Bay. It seems to have Herman Mashaba more or less under its thumb in Johannesburg, and it's sort of biding its time in Tshwane.
How is that possible, though?
Well, it's possible because it has no formal obligations. So it doesn't have any duty to the public or the fiscus or a ministry or MEC position.
But then how would why would the DA allow it to run amok if that's how they feel about Nelson Mandela Bay?
Yes.
And they behave differently in
Well, I think there are two schools of thought in the DA, and I don't think they've resolved it for themselves yet. The one school of thought says, look, the ANC is this giant hegemonic machine that has dominated South African politics for 25 years. We must absolutely create an alternative to that. And if that requires working with the EFF, then so be it. The other school of thought says, okay, fair enough, but the EFF is so mad, so radical, and so dangerous that if we legitimate it in any kind of way, we'll do even more damage to the democratic project than working with it. And I don't think the DA knows the answer to that question, and it hasn't been forced to choose it in a kind of relationship where the EFF has to formally be part of a coalition. So how it resolves that conflict, it needs to have a discussion inside and arrive at one conclusion or the other.
Very briefly, Bill, do you think this will ever happen, or at what point?
Oh, well, it could. Look, Ramaphosa and the government are under increasing international pressure to carry out structural reforms. Now, if they are pushed in that direction, the overlap between DA policy and ANC policy will grow. So, yeah, I think it's not an impossibility in the future.
Nice.
Can I just make one point? The DA may be losing in Gauteng and Western Cape. It's picking up in some provinces, and one of the places it's notably picking up is the Eastern Cape. And it may well be that that coalition which Athol Trollip had there did them quite a lot of good, because there seems to have been a continuing pro-DA effect there.
We'll see, if that ever happens. Well, that's a wrap for the race this week. The election is looming large on the horizon. Whoever you support and whatever your politics, one thing's for sure, the race is on.